Okay, hi everybody. Very pleased to be joined by Team US captain Zach Johnson. Zach, your players are all out on the course playing their first practice round. What sort of things are you looking for from your team at this stage of the week?
At this stage of the week, my hope is that they're waking up. We're still in kind of the acclimation period, I think, given the travels, and we don't start competition for 3 days. So I'm confident that they will be acclimated shortly. But it's good just to get our feet on the ground. It's good to get the guys out there and start feeling the golf course. And it'll change, as time goes on a little bit. I mean, the forecast is pretty consistent. Does not feel like a normal weather Ryder Cup week at all, but it's spectacular. So thank you, Italy. Just get out there, get used to each other, and get a feel for the golf course. It's so far they've only played 4 or 5 or 6 holes, but the guys are anxious to get going.
Perfect. We'll go straight into questions, starting with mic number 1 over here.
Hey, Zach, over here.
Yes, sir.
2 unrelated questions, one of which is regarding first tee and first timers. Obviously, we talked yesterday about how large that grandstand is. Is there a message that you mentioned to the guys that have not gone through it before, based on your experience, and also, do you recall your first tee experience?
Sure. Yes. I mean, some of the veterans have spoken about it, obviously, and some of the vice captains and myself. I mean, I'm very confident in saying that I think I haven't been in every massive or high weighted sporting event, but I would say it's one of the best spectacles in sports. I think if you can understand that not many people get that opportunity, that's a pretty awesome opportunity. So relish it, savor it, want it, embrace it, all of that, knowing it's not going to be easy, but at the same time, you can kind of flip that. You can kind of flip it mentally and say, this is where I belong, and there's a reason why it's big. It's because this is the best sporting event in the game of golf.
You remember, Luke was just telling us he was off the reservation to the right on his first tee shot in a Ryder Cup on one. Do you remember what you did, and
I do.
What your feeling was standing behind?
Sure, I'll try to make this brief. I sat out the first session that Friday, which would have been 4-ball back then. Forget the year, doesn't matter. But Tom Lehman said, you're going to play in the afternoon, so get ready. He's like, sleep in, go to the gym, do whatever you need to do. My wife went to the first tee. And prior to that, obviously, the veterans are saying, hey, we did this, we were going to do this, we changed. You hear all the stories of how their nerves are going, they're unsettled. Anyway, my wife comes back and goes, it is so loud. I'm like, great. And then she goes, in a really simple yet profound manner, she's like, they quieted down a little bit. The guy grabbed his club, put a peg in the ground, put a ball on it, hit it down the fairway, and found the green. It's still just golf. It is. If you can get to that point, from a focus standpoint, it is still just golf. But it's also, man, it's just the best. It's the most awesome spectacle in our game.
And just unrelated on Justin Thomas, obviously. In some circles, he was a little bit of a controversial pick just because of his form this year. Obviously, his Ryder Cup form's been pretty good. Is there some element of the fact that regardless of what he's done on the tour this year, this is a completely different animal, and all that stuff goes by the board, so to speak, and why do you think he's so made for this?
Yeah, well, that's part of it. There's a lot of elements involved when it comes to all of our guys and the picks in particular. Obviously the 6 guys earned their way, right? But all the elements go into that equation. Recent form, you could kind of goes both ways. We look at it both statistically and subjectively. It's not just the last 2 or 3 months. There's a lot of other factors involved there when it comes to the objective. And then obviously subjectively, he has all the intangibles and the innate ability to rally guys around him and be a leader with vocally, but also without having to say much. So there's a lot of, I'd say, invaluable elements when it comes to JT and this event. And I can say this in full confidence with our 6 guys that made this team. Those guys were, adamant. They wanted those 6 other guys to help complete their team, and JT was one of them. I'm not saying that was my persuasion to pick him, but that was part of it.
Go to mic number 3 at the back.
Good morning, Zach. I'd just like to reflect a little bit more on Whistling Straits 2 years ago. Obviously, an unusual Ryder Cup in the sense that there were so few travelling fans. How much of a factor was that, do you think, in that contest? And what are you doing to prepare the guys that have never experienced a more normal Ryder Cup, particularly now it's away from home, where you're going to have so many fans against you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're substantially different as an American, right? Obviously, our fans were there in full effect. Easier to travel, given limitations, given the COVID hurdles. Goes without saying, extremely unfortunate. Extremely unfortunate we couldn't play it in 2020. But I can see how that was unfortunate for the European team not having their contingent more readily around them. We've talked to the guys. I mean, they know that this is an entirely different animal than Wisconsin. So, what happened there, certainly the result of that, and then everything that goes into it, we've learned from it, but it's done. And this is an entirely different team on an entirely different venue, obviously an entirely different continent. So it's going to be more trying. It's going to be more difficult. Want it, love it, and get after it, because this is where you belong.
Go to Martinucci at the front.
Yes, can you explain to me why most of media, they say that the U.S. team are favorite? And please don't do like over captain and team captain. They say they are equal 50-50. Say something different. Say, yes, we are favorite. And why?
What? I'm sorry.
Most of media, they say U.S. team are favorite.
The media is saying that we are the favorites?
Most of them.
Well, the media knows everything, so yeah, that makes sense.
Why do you think they say this?
I have no idea.
And can you say something different so you don't say we are...
I mean, I'm not going to speak on behalf of anybody else, let alone the media. I appreciate them. I know they're doing their job. I don't know what media you're referring to, because I really kind of try to ignore the noise. No offense. I appreciate it all, but the way I see it, when it comes to favorites or this, that, or the other, we're not the favorites when we step onto the first tee because of the crowd. We're not the favorites because of what's happened and transpired over the last so many odd years. And they've got a really, really, really good team playing well. So, hey, I love that. Our backs are against the wall, and that's the way we're going to approach it.
Shane on mic number 3.
Zach, are you guys the favorites? Just kidding. I was reading...
I'm still trying to figure out your question from yesterday. Go ahead.
This one's easier. It's not about the Roman Empire. I was reading about Tom Watson's first captaincy in 1993, and there was a story that he spoke with Roy Williams, the basketball coach. The idea being he wanted to consult somebody. It's not normal for a golfer, individual sport. So I'm curious who you've learned from. I assume, you've been a vice captain, but is there anybody else beyond those guys that you kind of look to for advice?
Yes and no. I've thought about that a lot, obviously. I've learned a lot from a lot of other, I guess you'd say, coaches or leaders, regardless of what genre they're in, whether it's sports or business or whatever it may be. I mean, I'm trying to gather as much as I can and retain as much as I can, implement some of the things that I feel like could be beneficial. Some of it's actually just for me and my own mentality, approach and focus. But I think I've done that from afar, not necessarily direct. I think you can learn so much just from reading and watching and experiencing it that way rather than actually firsthand discussions necessarily. I'm not saying that that can't be beneficial. I just didn't pursue that. And part of my rationale for not really pursuing that is one of, we've got a pretty good foundation, I think, laid within Team USA and how we go about things. And, I mean, there's a responsibility there. But more than that, I think it's less is more. And I think, you know, these guys know what they're doing. And so if I were to introduce something from some expertise, it could be cloudy or it could fog something up, and it just doesn't need to happen. It's not saying that it's not worthy or has merit. It just, I think we kind of know that the simplistic view of letting these guys have access to all they need to do Monday through Thursday so they can be ready Friday through Sunday is really just that simple. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Do you, you may have already just answered this, but the follow-up would be, now that you're in the captain's seat, is there one thing you can pinpoint as saying, this is a hard thing I didn't expect about being the leader of a team?
Well, there's a lot of things that were difficult that I had to kind of navigate up until this point. A lot of things that surfaced that didn't expect, but I think the PGA of America would probably say the same thing. But nothing that of any, I mean, I don't need to be specific with it. I think when it came, you know, when I was put in this position, the difficult things that came right to my mind were, how do we formulate the team? Are we going to keep the same system, right? And I'm not on the Ryder Cup committee currently, but those that are essentially kept our system the same. And then, obviously, I'm in it now. Who plays and who doesn't? I mean, those are the difficult situations that arose right off the bat. And, you know, I was ready to tackle that. You know, things that have been unforeseen, other than those aren't unforeseen. Those are things that were known. You just control what you can control. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, I know that sounds cliche, but it is the truth. I mean, there's only so much I can do given what this is all about, and that's fine. I mean, I know my role. I'm here to serve, number one, and take all the burden off them as much as possible so they can go play.
We'll stick on the same row.
Zach, it's...
No, you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, bud.
Hi. How do you approach getting ready for foursomes? I mean, do you actually have the guys practicing the format, or do you only talk about it? What about?
Sure.
How much did you do that when you were here a couple of weeks ago? And still, how much is the ball really a factor in those decisions?
The ball? Is that what you said?
Yeah, because they're
Yeah.
obviously not going to
Sure.
play the same golf ball they're used to.
Sure. Well, the first part of your question, yeah, we've advised them to play some alternate shot, maybe even modified, where you can that way you can get more reps in. You're both teeing off, and then you're just switching. Does that make sense? I mean, there's ways to go about doing it so you can get more reps in on the golf course, which helps you for singles, which helps you for four ball. But yes, we've told them, hey, it may be wise, and it could help speed up your practice round a little bit if you want to get some more practice in, or physio working, or whatever it may be. So they're in tune with that, and that's nothing new. They've done that in the past. I did that when I was playing. What was the second part of your question? Sorry. Oh, golf ball. Yeah, I mean it's we were discussing it actually the last couple of days. It is a part of the equation, but there's ways. With 3 practice round days and arguably a practice round trip, there's ways to get used to somebody else's golf ball off the tee. And that's really what it is, right? If we're playing together, I'm probably going to tee off with your golf ball more times than not so that we can have more control with your iron play or wedge play or whatever it may be with your own golf ball. That's kind of the unwritten rule, right? But these guys know what they're doing. I mean, there's some guys that were like, I really don't care what golf ball I play. I like that guy's golf ball, we'll just play it. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. I don't need to coach them on how to go about doing that.
Okay, we've got time for 2 more, just starting down here.
What's that? Right. Correct. Yeah, the one ball rule's not in effect.
Zach, as a former Open champion, you have Brian Harmon on your team this year. Despite being a rookie, I'm wondering if you have an opinion on how much winning the Open Championship and having to play your first Ryder Cup here in Europe helps him.
Yeah, I mean, Brian is, he's a good friend, number one. Number two, I've had a lot of discussions with Brian prior to my captaincy even about these cups. Because I'm close enough to him, I live near him. We played a lot together over the years. We kind of approach things in a very similar manner. He's got a great team that he's assembled that I know well. I just know how he goes about his work. I just feel like he's cut and made for these kind of teams. I say that. It doesn't mean you're going to play them all, and it's really difficult to play to make the teams. But, yeah, I think his win I think anybody's win in a stage of that magnitude can be extremely beneficial. I didn't watch every shot inside the ropes or even outside the ropes that he hit during the Open, but it's pretty documented that there were some things kind of jeered and whatnot, and that's to be expected given where it was and who he is and who he's not, right? So knowing Brian, that's probably more fuel to the fire, if you will, and he has that ability and that just the talent to mentality to kind of make that be a positive. So I think he's truly made for these events. What does Brian do well? What does he do poorly is the easier question. Because it's an easy answer. I don't know if he does anything poorly. He just does everything really, really, really consistently well.
Final question on number one.
Zach, it's been a while now since the U.S. pod system was first introduced. What do you view as the strengths and weaknesses of that approach for today's player in 2023?
Well, I think there's the quote unquote pod system was obviously implemented by Paul Azinger, a good friend and somebody I've talked to. We've nuanced it probably more so than. There's more fluidity and versatility in our system now than there was then. Not to say that we wouldn't re-implement the exact structure that he did at some point. I don't think we will per se. But I think there's merit to it. I think there's really merit to it if you got a team that doesn't know each other all that well, doesn't maybe play practice rounds together or hang out together outside the ropes. I think there's probably, this is an assumption, but I think there definitely would be a lot of positives if that was the case. Given our 12 guys, these guys want to change things up and play and roll and kind of just see who's, they just want to be around each other, on and off the golf course. So we're taking a version of it probably and kind of making it our own and letting these guys be comfortable as given the fact that it's a pretty uncomfortable situation. Well, I think all of years past have been more fluid since 2008. That was the only one that was I wasn't on that team. I've read and been told by those that were that it was like you're staying in year 4 for the whole week, not only playing but eating, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're not going to be that structured. And again, I'm not dismissing the point of that or even the merit to that, but I think since that point it hasn't exactly been exactly like that.
Zach, thanks very much for your time.
Oh, that was easy. Thank you.